how do you think about the fretboard? I tend to think about it in positions, and then I guess my struggle, like everyone else, is trying to bridge the gap between those positions, right?
Yeah.
Which I've been doing by combining positions to try to visualize the fretboard or visualize scales on a longer area of the neck.
I see what you mean. Visualizing the fretboard is it's a lifelong journey. I used to lose sleep because I was visualizing things in my head at night, and then I would just like not sleep. I don't know. I've gone through different things. I used to visualize a whole bit of scale, like a whole chunk of the fretboard, and then move that around depending on what key I'm in. So if I'm thinking C minor, I'm like just this whole area of the fretboard is mapped out. Like I'm not confused about it at any point, right? It's like all obvious. And that's cool when you're playing over simpler stuff, right? Like chords that are all in C minor, right?
Right.
Because then you could just go forever, and then maybe you influence your note choice from the chord that you're on, but the key is laid out. So that kind of worked for me for a while. But then I realized that this was actually not the most efficient way to do things. And a much more efficient way to visualize the fretboard is to visualize smaller chunks of information. So if I take the same example, if we're in C minor, and I just start visualizing roots, so like C, and then I visualize stuff around it. So C, 5, 7, 11, 3, 9, root, right?
Interesting.
And then what happens is, because I'm thinking of less information, I'm not thinking of, the whole fretboard. I'm thinking of just where I am and where the roots is and the intervallic relation between the roots, right?
Yeah.
Is that now you can start playing changes. Because for example, if I take even like an E flat 2-5, you could go like, right? So you think of the arpeggios, and then you think of the next chord, and then in that case I kind of played like a flat 13 and a flat 9 because I wanted that sound, and then you resolve on the third. So that stuff is kind of a double-edged sword because it's much harder to start doing.
Yeah.
It's very hard, and I'm not perfect at it. I'm pretty good at demonstrating it. There's some scenarios where it's happening, like some harmonic examples, like some chord progressions I can really do it, and some chord progressions I really can't do it. Depends what you practice, right? Like the whole thing with this way of thinking is that it gets you to stop playing bullshit.
Right. It seems much more intentional.
It's much more intentional. And you start playing thirds and sevens properly, right? Because if I'm thinking like, okay, 2-5-1 in E flat. Oh, fucking yeah. Like a C pentatonic.
Yeah.
That works. That's cool, But if you go like, right, it becomes a lot more intentional. And you could do it from other places too, right? Like, and then the challenge is like, okay, like how do I make this interesting again? I'm playing over a 2-5, so there's a bit of cheese, coming through. But that's sort of more intentional, like mindful playing, where you're actually playing stuff on purpose and knowing what you're playing. That is what I strive to do all the time. In real life, it's not as black and white as that. I'm not a perfect person. Sometimes you just kind of noodle, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But at the very least, when I'm practicing, that is what I'm trying to do actively.
Yeah, and then like using stuff that you practice and trying to put it into a live context or playing with just other musicians really like forces you to know it. Like I feel like guys who just stay in their room, never play with anyone else, you get kind of like where you don't know your weaknesses. I need to do it more too, where you just put yourself in situations where you're maybe not super comfortable. Yeah.
Real life performance takes its own practice, and the only way to practice performing is to perform. You can kind of get there, jamming in a space with some boys, but it's not quite the same as playing something, in a space where you are truly inspired and there's people watching and listening and responding to what you're playing. It's then being able to make music out of that and getting inspired and creative from that is a whole different thing than being able to tell where the third is on this chord.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. How do you think about the fretboard?
I'm such like a mode guy. I try to do the thing where I'm thinking, okay, exactly what interval am I playing and how is it relating to the chord that I'm playing it over? But a lot of the time I'm more focused on what modes I could be playing over a chord and like what like vibe, I guess, are you trying to do? Which is why I like ambiguous chords, right? Like the one that everybody does, or at least I do a lot. That guy. There's so much stuff that you could play over that. Right, you can make it. If you wanted to, you can Dorian, anything, right? How am I thinking about the fretboard? I guess that doesn't really relate to the fretboard.
No, but that makes sense. Like you're just thinking of larger chunks of information, and it's kind of on a fader. Like for me, that sort of color, like adding a color to a chord. I'm thinking that as like, oh, I'm gonna play the flat 9.
Yeah.
Right, but then to you,
but I would be thinking, oh, Phrygian.
To me, it's all the same. Like to me, it's just like an interval over a bass note.
I guess it's just a way for me to map it out in my head. Choosing like to have one mode resolve to another over a chord that says static can be an interesting sound. So when I'm thinking about the fretboard, I'm like, I'll try to visualize everything in like maybe Phrygian, and then I'll visualize the fretboard in Dorian. But I know how they're related to each other, so it's not like a crazy thing to visualize the whole fretboard as one mode and then switch to the next.
Right. It's just like sometimes the scenario doesn't allow for that for my slow brain, so I have to think of less and less information so that I could switch quicker.
Right, but I'm not usually playing over crazy changes.
Yeah, thankfully, me too. But I want to be able to, when I'm practicing that stuff, like I'm playing all the things you are. Voice leading through these changes and not playing bullshit kind of keeps me grounded. You make enough fucking gent, you start playing a lot of bullshit. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I want to have more impact with less. So being in control of that, like omitting stuff on purpose and then putting it back in has a lot of impact. It's like playing only pentatonics, right? Like you could do your like, and then you're just like,
yeah. When I'm playing over like the prog stuff, I tend to avoid the 6 and then hit it at like certain points, to kind of keep it like with my modal sound, right? I'll avoid it so that I'm not really saying, okay, what is this? And then at a certain point, like you're in A and you're avoiding it, and then maybe you'll finally hit that Dorian or whatever it is, right? And then it like, I guess, implies the mode and then you can go back out of it and play a different thing.
No, I see what you mean. That's definitely, yeah. Playing guitar is whack. Thank you for watching this video of Josh and I talking about guitar stuff. We're going to be splitting up these little clips between both of our channels. So make sure to subscribe to his channel as well as mine. And yeah, see ya.